Okay, here is a video showing the first two problems from Chapter 5. Homework exercises 5.1 and 5.2 at the end of the chapter. Number 1 says open a new workbook, go into the VBA, and insert a module. Enter the following code. Okay, so I have my open workbook here. I'm going to come over here to the underneath book 2, right-click in the white space. I'm going to insert a module. And this is going to put that inside of book 2. Here's my module 1 that was created, and here's the code where I can add from the textbook. So I'm going to copy this. I'm going to paste it. Needs a little bit of help here. Let me go ahead and format some of this. Let's see, where else? I think that's it. So we've got these guys, and I like to have the indents, so I'm going to go ahead and indent this just to make this a little more readable. And what I've done here is, let's see, what's going on here? There's two variables that are being declared, number of pounds and day of week. There's a number of pounds equals 17.5. There's a day of week where we're actually putting values into these variables. And then there's a message box that says number of pounds and pounds were ordered on this day of the week. Okay, so we entered the following code. It says there's two problems here. One causes the program to fail. The other causes an incorrect result. What are the problems and fix them? Let's go ahead and run this, see what happens. So if I click on run, it says there's a type mismatch. Runtime error 13. I'm going to click on debug here. That's going to tell me kind of where that problem is. Okay, so let's look at this line of code. This says day of week equals Monday. Okay, now what's interesting here is I hold my cursor over it, it says day of week is equal to 0. So there looks like a mismatch, right? And if sure enough, if I look back at how this variable was declared, that's one problem, right? This day of week was declared as an integer. And later here, we're trying to say it was a string, right? This Monday, in quotes, is a string. So Excel is saying to us, hey, buddy, you got to get your code right. You're telling me two things at once here. I can't do both. That's kind of what that error message means, only I'm paraphrasing. We've got to fix that. So I'm assuming that we want this Monday to be text because it's going to come up in this message box, which means the correction we need to make is this. So instead of an integer, we're going to want to correct that to a string. We're going to want to define that variable as a string. And if I make that change, Excel says, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to have to reset running this because you've changed the variable. And is that okay with you? And yes, I'm going to click OK. That's okay with me. It's going to reset. I'm going to go ahead and click on run again. Notice my cursor is inside the sub. I'll click on run. And it works. Look at that. 18 pounds were ordered on Monday. Okay, now this is interesting. This works. We found one error. Let's go back to the problem. There's two errors, it says. One causes the program to fail. Okay, that one we fixed, right? It failed. It looks like it's running now because we get a message box. The other causes an incorrect result. Explain what they are and when they fix them. So what is this incorrect result here? Well, it looks like that it's rounding to an integer in this case, right? We've set the variable 17.5 here, but it's displaying 18 pounds. Why is that? Again, if we look back up to how this variable was defined, it was defined as an integer. Isn't that interesting? So we told Excel we want an integer here for number of pounds, but then we gave it 17.5. Remember, an integer is a number without decimal points. So again, that's an error that we've made logically. We need to choose one side of the fence or the other. And I'm assuming here that the way the intention of the program was written is they want to keep the decimals. So let's go ahead and change the program so that we can keep the decimals showing up in the message box. How do we do that? Is we're going to change, instead of an integer, we're going to change this to a single. Single or a double. A double is a little bit more precision. A single will give us the precision that we need for this kind of decimal. Just one decimal point and a single will work fine. So if we redefine that as a single, instead of an integer, we should see now 7.5 displayed in the message box. So I'm going to change that. I'm going to click on Run. And there it is, 17.5 pounds were ordered on Monday. So those are the two changes. It turns out that we changed the declaration of these variables. Instead of integers, we changed the day of week to a string. And instead of integer, we changed in pounds to a single to account for the decimal point. And that's problem number 1. Good job. Number 2, open a new workbook. Go into the VBE, insert a module, and enter the following code. So we have a module already working here, and we'll just go ahead and do the same thing. It'll take a little bit to format it. I think that's just the way this is copied and pasted. There might be a better way to do this. But I don't mind doing this here for a second. So I hit enter, and it reformatted with the end sub again. So let me grab this text, I'll cut it and paste it back in here. And then we just need to find where the lines start. So we have customer name is one line start, in purchases, and I'm looking over here. Here's in purchases. We have total spent. Here's total spent over here. We have, what else? We have for counter, which is right here. I'll indent that. We have an amount spent. And I'll grab the amount spent right here. And I will indent that as well as part of inside. There's an indent there. And then I'll indent the and to try to copy that. Then we have a total spent. So I'm going to find my total spent. Again, I'm just trying to format this so I can see it a little bit better. Then we have a next line. I'm going to indent that. We have a message box after the next. And then I'm just going to indent this line like so. What I've done is just tried to recreate. I'm going to indent that line. Recreate this code over here. That looks like I've got it. Okay, now this says, what does this say? Make sure there's no option explicit line at the top of the module. Okay, this is saying delete it. I need to delete this option explicit line. Then run the program. So I'm going to go ahead and run this program. I'm clicking inside of this sub, and I'm going to click on the green arrow, run. Enter the name of a customer. Okay, looks like something's running here. I'm going to put my name. Enter the number of purchases made by John during the month. I'm going to say 3, pick a low number. Enter the amount spent by John on purchase 1. Okay, let's say I went somewhere and I spent some money. I'm going to do $17.50. Enter the amount spent by John on purchase 2. I was a little bit more frugal. I just spent $5 on that one. Purchase 3. Well, it was pizza night, and we had to get some pizza. Okay, John spent a total of $47.50 during the month. Okay. It says run the program. It should work fine. Okay, it worked fine. I think we got it. So part A is done. Part B. Enter the option explicit line at the top of the module. Now run the program, and it should produce an error. All right, so we're going to come way back up here. We're going to type in option explicit. Then we're going to come back to this sub, inside the sub, and I'm going to click on run. It says error, variable not defined. Okay, so if we remember from the reading and the text, option explicit requires that variables are declared. But it turns out that in this sub, none of them are declared. So we need to go and declare the variables and run the sub again. So I'm going to go ahead and stop or reset the runner here. And I'm going to come into the sub and I'm going to start declaring variables. Okay, the first one that I see is customer name. So let's type that in, customer name. How should I define that? I'm going to define that as a string, str, and there's my string option. I'm going to hit tab, and that will pull it in there, and then enter. Go to the next one. So the reason I want a string is because it's going to be somebody's name. So that's going to be a string. I don't want numbers for somebody's name. I want that to be a string. Next, I will do another one. What's the next one? N purchases. So let's do N purchases. How do I want to define that? We know that this is going to be a number of purchases. So this could be an integer, right? We're probably not going to have half purchases. They're probably going to be whole. So I'm just going to define that as an integer. Type in my int, hit tab, and do enter. Okay, so that's the second one. Is there another variable in this line that we haven't defined? No, we've already defined customer name. So we're going to the next line, total spend. We need to define total spent. So I'm going to dim total spent. It is case sensitive, so I need to make sure that I have the exact case here, lowercase and uppercase. And how am I going to define that as? I'm going to define that as currency because it's going to be a money of value. So that gives me, I think, a more accurate representation of how I'm going to use that variable as currency. And I'll type enter there, and I'm finding more variables. Here's another variable, counter. So let me do a dim for counter. Counter is very much going to be an integer, so I'll use integer there. I'm here at this line. I'm looking for in purchases we've already defined. Amount spent is a new one, so I need to dim or declare amount spent with a capital S. And that's also going to be defined as currency. I could also do a single if I wanted to. Either one will work logically here. That's amount spent. And then I'm looking here, input box, customer name is already defined, and counter is already defined. Total spent is defined, and amount spent is defined. So we should be, let me check here, customer name is defined, total spent is defined, and VB information is the type of message box. So we actually don't need to define that as a variable. That's not a variable. So I think we've defined all the variables that we need to define. Now that we have our option explicit included, we have declared our variables. Let's go ahead and run this. I'm going to click inside the sub somewhere. I'm going to click on the green bar, and there it is. It comes up. Let's run it to make sure it works. How many purchases? This month I only made 2 purchases. The first purchase was for, let's say, it was expensive, $500. The second purchase was another expensive. It was a bad month. $1,000 during the month. So that looks like it works correctly. And that is the B. So now it works. In fact, that's the entire 5.2. So what we've done is we've done 5.1 and 5.2 at the end of the chapter. Hopefully this is helpful.